Savior, I come to thee.
Hey everybody, that was a guy named Klaus, and he does that. That's a song I discovered on Pandora a while ago, and actually saved it on my playlist. It's just one of those ones that pops up when it starts playing. I have to literally stop what I'm doing and I have to listen to it because, I mean, for those of you who know the hymn, it's a whole hymn, and yet I like the fact that he just took the best part of the hymn and he just did that, and he just repeated it and repeated the poignant part, and didn't make it flowery, and just did that part. I loved it. I wanted to share that with you. It's one that you've heard me do before. My white balance is a little off here. I can see on Instagram, so you guys, hey, I'm really bright today. That it's my magnanimous personality.
That's right.
Hey, here in the studio today, I got Lisa and Evan. So hopefully, if they have questions, they won't be silent and they'll ask. Or if they have comments, they won't be silent either. And if you guys have any questions or whatnot, definitely join in. If you're watching this on live stream and you want to be able to interact with us live, feel free to also, on your phones, you can pull us up on your Instagram. If you have an Instagram account, you can find us. We are Jam at Home, Jam. And I don't know how particular they are, but if they're really particular, it's capital JAM, and then underscore, and then at capital A, lowercase t, underscore, home, capital H, and then OME. So Jam at Home, and that's how you find us. And there you go. That's us. And then once you log in and you see us, you'll be able to see where we, the little circles. You'll be able to see how we're live. You just click on that. If you subscribe to us there, when we go live, you'll get a notification that we're going live. And then once you hop on there, then just click on, and we'll see you populate. I always like to click and I do a wave to say hello to you, and then you can ask your questions right there. You can ask questions live. We see them on our camera, and we're able to respond right away. So it's just another way for you guys to get more information from us, and for us to be able to give information about the Bible to you. And then also on YouTube, that's going to be more after the fact, because with YouTube, we don't get to see those questions until afterwards, but you're always able to interact with us as well on YouTube. So, and that's just youtube.com/C, which means channel. That means you're going to go to our channel, and then /the journey. youtube.com/C/the journey. And there's a link on there. You can click subscribe, but there's an actual link that you can click on, and you can save that. And anytime we go live, you can actually click on, you can save that link, or you can click on it, and you can actually it pulls up a special window, and you can actually watch us as we go live. All right, and then, also finally on our website, HTTPS, if you're going to be old school and type the whole thing out, and then it's just www.thejourneyadventministries.com, and then you can go /live, or you can navigate through our website. You're just looking for live events, and then when you go to our live page, you'll see right now it simulcasts from live stream. And so right now from our page, we're broadcasting live, and you can watch us live just like that too. So and then your smart TVs, they all know how to hook into all of this stuff. So hey, I'm glad you guys could tune in with us. Before we get started, we're going to have a quick word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for being here with us today. The Bible tells us where two or more are gathered in your name, you're going to be in the middle of them. So we are grateful that you're here in the studio with us. We're grateful that you are around this world with all who will tune in and watch, both today and then later on. We have no idea when these broadcasts get watched, but we know that your word will not return unto you void. Father, we just ask that you would look upon us and forgive us of our sin, see beyond our fault, and see our need. We need you. We need you here right now to help us to understand what we see and what we read. Father, we pray these things in Jesus' name.
Every hour.
Yes, absolutely. So we're reading today, and our study today has taken us now from the third commandment, which is what we've been studying, and now we're moving on to the fourth commandment. So for those of you who are following along with us and studying, Ursula has been taking us and doing a slow, methodical march through the book of Genesis, and I am taking you through the 10 Commandments. And so what we're doing right now is we are now on commandment number 4. Okay? So commandment number 4. And it's going to be found in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. 10 Commandments, like I've said before, the 10 Commandments are actually found in 2 different locations in the Bible. They're going to be found in the book of Exodus, and they're going to be found in the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means story twice told. And we're going to be actually following along in the book of Exodus and studying this commandment. Actually, so far, we have studied the first 4 commandments in the book of Exodus, and that's where we're going to keep going. And we're only going to do Exodus 20, verse 8. The 4th commandment actually encompasses a little bit more than just 20, verse 8. We're going to just stick with Exodus 20, verse 8 today for part 1 of this. And today it's actually called It Was Already in Place. All 10 of the commandments give us instruction. Only 8 of the commandments, there are 8 of the commandments that actually start off with thou shalt not. 2 of the commandments don't start off with a thou shalt not. One of them is the first commandment with promises, the commandment number 5, which we'll be getting into in a few weeks. And that's the commandment that talks about our relationship with our parents. But commandment number 4 actually says this, and then we're going to start with Exodus 20, verse 8. And in the King James Version, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Contemporary English Version says, remember that the Sabbath day belongs to me. Now, I think it's really interesting, and I think it's something that we shouldn't gloss over, and I think it's something that definitely bears a lot of scrutiny and personal thought. For those who question whether or not the Sabbath is something that we should be doing right now, the Sabbath is something that oftentimes when people talk about the commandments, there's a big question as to whether or not we need to be keeping the commandments now, because we live in a time where we live under the law. We no longer live under the law, we live under grace. And so because we live under grace, there's no need to have this emphasis on keeping the law. And so of course there's tons, I've heard all kinds of clever comebacks, we don't kill anybody and we don't do this and we don't do that. And yet we know these things happen in society, but we know that we have human laws against this. There are moral laws, and there are reasons why we don't do these things. And so the debate rages on as to whether or not the law is in place or the law is not in place. And my job today, I've decided, is to not debate whether or not the law is in place or not in place. Are we under grace? Are we under the law? I want to focus on the actual language of this commandment and allow us to actually use our minds and just think about this for just a moment. So Exodus 20 verse 8, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That's what it says. So now, of course, because you know me, I'm always complaining about the English language and how we take and we ruin everything. So what I wanted to know is, when Moses gets this command from God, God's writing this down on these tables of stone. He's writing with his own finger in this stone, and he is giving this instruction to Moses. What are the words that are being written in stone? What is God actually saying? Because we know this isn't something that Moses is interpreting. We know this isn't something that Moses isn't translating. This is not Moses' idea. This is something that's coming straight from God to Moses. So what does God actually write down? So if you ever want to do your own research, if you want to get an idea of what's going on, there's a website that's called BibleHub.com. And BibleHub.com actually allows you to take a look at the Bible, and it breaks it down. You can actually see the Bible in the different languages that it was written in, and it actually shows you not just the Bible verse, but you can actually look up, and it'll show you, like when you're in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is written predominantly in Hebrew, and yet there are they have an interlinear structure on the website so that you can see that if there are certain parts of the Old Testament that are written in Aramaic, it'll help you, it'll tell you that. And not only will it show you that, but it'll actually show you the actual Hebrew language. Now, I don't read Hebrew, so I'm not telling you guys that I'm this huge scholar, so don't get me wrong on this. But I can read, and I'm able to look and see, and on here on Bible Hub, it actually helps you see these things. So when I go to Bible Hub and I look at Exodus 20 verse 8, it tells me that the actual word that's used is this word in Hebrew. It's called zakar. And zakar is actually defined remember. So when God writes this down, he actually uses the word remember. And it's not a big, huge mystery, folks. He's not using metaphors, and he's not using, he's not telling a parable or some type of story. He's actually giving this word and saying remember, as though there was something that was already in place. There was something that was already set. It was already something that they were supposed to have been doing, and there's no inference here as to whether or not they forgot, or is something that they stopped doing, but it was something that they were supposed to do, and they were not supposed to forget, something that they were to remember. And so as you go through all of the different, they have different concordances here, different commentaries, different scholars that go through, and they take and they track these different words. This word remember, this word zakar, is it's an Assyrian word, and they come down and they try to help explain all of the different places where you can find this. They talked about how it was used in the book of Deuteronomy, which is also the other place where they talk about this, and the other mention of the commandments. But every single time they talk in relationship to this word remember, as though something was already in place. So I get to thinking, well, if it's already in place, then we should already have something prior to Exodus 20 verse 8. There should already be some instruction. There should already be something about the Sabbath. And of course, we know this because we've already done a study. Ursel, our associate pastor, was actually teaching us about this during the creation week. And we know that at the end of the creation week, after the sixth day, after everything was made, then it says that on the seventh day God rested from everything that he made. He took that seventh day, he consecrated, he made it holy, and he called it the Sabbath day. And so this was something that was actually instituted before there was any sin, before sin had happened, before anything, and then the Sabbath was made. So before there was any need for a law, we have the Sabbath. And that's really important, because as you go through and you study and you go into the Hebrews and you go into the book, a book called James. James was an elder brother of elder half brother of Jesus, who actually writes a book in the Bible. And James actually tells us that we wouldn't even know what sin was if we didn't have the law, because by the law helps define, and then so that's how we know when we sin. When we break the law, then we sin. So sin helps, the law helps us understand that thing that separates us from God. And we don't have an understanding of what that thing that separates us from God until we go back to Genesis and we read that story between Eve and the serpent and how they interact, and how all of a sudden that separation from Adam turns into a separation from God, and they no longer are allowed to be in the Garden of Eden. So this whole notion of somehow we don't get the Sabbath until after their sin, and so because of that, because Jesus died on the cross, we no longer have to keep the Sabbath because the law was done away with at the cross. Well, not so. The Sabbath existed before there was any sin. So when God is writing this down on the tables of stone, he is actually taking them back to the beginning. Remember that before the flood, Moses writes that he tells us that God repents, he regrets that he has made man, because as the scripture tells us, every thought in the mind of man was evil continuously. And so then, as a result, he regretted that he made man. And the word that was written down was actually a Hebrew word, teshuvah, which meant to return. What God actually meant was he wanted to go back to the way it was in the beginning. And so this whole idea was that God didn't actually want to erase man and forget about man, and because he didn't love man, he wanted to go back and have that original relationship with man where he could walk and talk, because that was his whole purpose. He loved us, and he wanted to be with us, and he wanted to have a face-to-face relationship with us. We come down to the Sabbath. The Sabbath is that special time that actually gives us the opportunity to go back to this Creator God, so that as we go through the rest of the commandments, or as we go through the rest of the fourth commandment, we'll begin to understand that there's something else far greater in this commandment. It's not just this law thing that everybody keeps talking about. When he says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, this notion, this idea of keeping it holy, this is a direct reference going back to the creation week. So it probably behooves us to go back to the creation week really quickly, just so that we can get an idea. So if you want to, you can go back to Genesis, and we're going to go back to Genesis, and we're going to go to chapter 1. So I'm going to go there live with you. I decided to do this with you instead of having everything all pre-typed out. Genesis 1, okay? So in Genesis chapter 1, we find the whole creation week, okay? So on the first day, he creates light. He sees light, it's good. Then on the second day, he separates the light. He separates the waters and separates the vapors. He creates an atmosphere, and then he creates land. And eventually, he creates the sun, moon, and stars. Of course, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. I won't get into it because I could see myself getting ready to head off on a tangent, and then.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. It was tough. That was hard. So then he makes an awareness that he has the a greater light and a lesser light. He creates. He fills the oceans with teeming with life. He fills the sky with life, with birds and everything. On the sixth day, he creates all the animals, and then he creates Adam and Eve. And then here we get down here, and that's what we have all in chapter 1. He goes through that whole week through chapter 1, okay? And then go to chapter 2, and then in chapter 2, it says right here, chapter 2, verse 1, so the heavens and the earth and everything else were created. In chapter 2, verse 2, by the seventh day, God had finished his work, so he rested. Now I'm reading from the Contemporary English Version, and for those of you who want a more authorized version, this is what the authorized version says right here. Genesis 2, verse 2. On the seventh day, God ended his work, which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had made. Verse 3, and God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in he had rested from all his work, which God created and made. So now, I'm going to go back to the Contemporary English Version. And I like to do this, folks, and you know this about me, taking multiple versions. 2 verse 3, God blessed the seventh day and made it special because on that day he rested from his work. That's how God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? So there we go. This gives you a really quick outline on how this day became holy and set apart from all the other days. So days 1 through 6 all had meaning and showed us the ability and the creative power and prowess of God. And everything, as you know, as Ursula walked us through, it showed us everything had a purpose, and everything was a building block for the next thing, and everything was designed. Everything that was designed, that was spearheading, so that it would support and give man everything that he would need to live, survive, and to thrive. Not just to hang in there, but so that he would thrive. And then at the end, it culminates with God taking the seventh day and setting it apart and making it different from everything else, and resting on that day, and actually by sanctifying something. When you sanctify something, you actually take it and you make it holy. So what God did when he took the seventh day and he sanctified it, he made it holy. So then the fourth commandment, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So the suggestion here is, and it's not really a suggestion, it's actually telling us this day was holy, I made it this way, and I want you to remember that I made it this way. So, yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if it's appropriate to remind people how it was determined that Saturday was the seventh day. Or is that a whole nother sermon?
Well, that probably gets us into future.
Okay, never mind.
But to just quickly address it, since you brought it up, if you notice that when you go through the book of Genesis, there is no Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There are no. There's the first day, there's second day, the third day, fourth day. So we don't have a Saturday kind of a thing. We get we get these days from the Latin, Monday is Moon Day. Sunday is the day of the sun, the venerable day of the sun. All of these days come from different parts of language, either be Latin or Greek, and so that's where we get these terms. Saturday is actually translated. Saturday actually comes from a word that actually means Sabbath. It means I used to have as a kid. Okay, and I'm a nerd, so don't let this be a surprise to you when I tell you this. As a kid, I used to have this big, huge chart, and it was over 6 feet long, and the chart was actually it had 600 different languages in which the day Saturday was translated in every single one of those languages. We called it Saturn Day, because that's in the English language, that's where we get it from. But every other language referred to Saturday as being Sabbath. So, for example, in Spanish, Saturday is Sábado, which means Sabbath. Everybody else calls it Sabbath except for the English. Don't get. I don't know what's up with us. But the reality is that's what it is. In over 600 languages of the world, the seventh day of the week was acknowledged as Sabbath, and somehow or other we're the ones who have decided to call it something different. So just to that's just a little sidebar tidbit. But as far as how we ended up getting there, that's going to be something excuse me, that we'll definitely want to talk about and emphasize. But that's a whole.
I kind of thought it was, but I also thought someone watching, that might be important to them. It might be a question that they have.
Well, that's okay, because even on every week, our hashtag is Saturday is the Sabbath. So regardless of what our topic is, that's one of the hashtags that folks can find us on when they're searching through YouTube. If you type in Saturday is the Sabbath, it'll pull us up. If you type in Sabbath, we're finding us on YouTube. There's all different ways to find us, and that's really it's a good thing. I don't know. Okay. The distinction that we're trying to make, though, because I think you are leading us in the right direction, and that is, it's the seventh day, and that's the thing that we're trying to, get to today, which will lead us into future weeks of discussion. Ursula won't be here next week, so I got I'll be able to do this 3 weeks in a row. Yay. So where was I going with this? Okay, here we go. So I know you threw me for a loop.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So
Sort of.
so we're going to be able to build from today, from remembering that the day was set aside and it was made holy, but also now we want to definitely make an emphasis. We have the first day, something happened; the second day, something happened; the third day, and then on the seventh day, God rested. So what does that mean to you and me today? And that's where we're bleeding now into Lisa's question, because today we don't go by first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day. We go by Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And there's been a big push as to what is actually the first day of the week. There are several calendars, and even on phones now, I've seen some phones where the default is for your day to start on Monday and not on Sunday, and you have to tell your calendar on your phone to have Sunday to be the start of the week instead of Monday to be the start of the week. And I have actually seen calendars that you can buy in the store where Monday starts the first day of the week instead of Sunday. So there's a from my biased opinion, and I'll just say that it's a biased opinion, my biased opinion, there's a huge assault that continues on changing the seventh day of the week from Saturday to Sunday. And yet, I want to go and I'll probably nip this and end on this so that I don't steal any thunder from future weeks. But I will do this. If you go into the New Testament, especially in the book of Matthew, and you begin to study the death of Jesus, and as a matter of fact, why don't we just do that really quick? So if you have your Bibles with you, if you have your paper Bibles, it's really easy. Matthew is the first book in the New Testament. So if you get to that book called Malachi, you're at the end of the Old Testament. Matthew would be the first book in the New Testament. It's the first gospel. If you have your electronic Bible and you're using the U version, just pull it up and you... And so I'm going to tell you. Okay, so I'm going to the book of Matthew. And I think I'm going to go to... check here and see. So I was right. So I believe we're going to go to Matthew chapter 28. Yes. Matthew chapter 28. I am going to start off in the authorized King James Version. So Matthew 28 verse 1, this is what it says. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and Mary and the other Mary came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to the sepulchre. Now the sepulchre is the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and raiment and white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men. The keepers were the soldiers that had been sent to watch the tomb and make sure that the disciples and no one else came to steal the body of Jesus, to make a claim that Jesus had been risen. And the angel answered and said unto the women, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Amen. Come and see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly tell his disciples that he is risen. He is risen from the dead, and behold, he goeth before you into Galilee, and there ye shall see him. Lo, I have told you. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and did run to bring this news to his disciples. So, in this first paragraph in Matthew 28, you have something really, really, really important to help define and help us get an understanding of time. It starts off at the end of the Sabbath. Now, we have often questioned, well, when is the Sabbath? How does the Sabbath start? So remember, go back to creation week. The evening and the morning was the first day. Evening and the morning was the second day. Evening and the morning was the third day. So by the time you get to the seventh day, the sixth day. Evening and the morning was the sixth day. So the evening then and the morning would be the seventh day. So our Sabbath starts on Friday sundown, because that's evening, then the morning, and so then as the sun would set on Saturday night, that would be when Sabbath would end. So the writer of the book of Matthew is telling us the Sabbath was over, and then he says, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week. So forget about Saturday or Sunday. What we know is the Sabbath is over, the first day of the week is beginning. This is, at some point here, is when the angel comes down, rolls the stone away from the tomb, and that is when Jesus is resurrected. So my question that I always ask folks when they begin this debate, because I don't like to debate, but when they begin, I just ask a simple question. When was Jesus raised from the dead? When is resurrection? Is it resurrection Saturday or is it resurrection Sunday? Was he resurrected on the first day of the week, or was he resurrected on the third day of the week? Was he resurrected He was resurrected on the first day of the week. It doesn't matter what you believe as far as the religion goes. It doesn't matter what church you go to. Everyone is 100% in agreement. Jesus rose on the first day of the week. He rose at dawn on the first day of the week. Everybody believes that. So if he rose on the first day of the week, that means the first day of the week can't be the seventh day of the week. The first day of the week can't be the seventh. So then that means the fourth commandment, when the fourth commandment talks about the seventh day of the week, it's not talking about the venerable day of the sun. It's not talking about on the Lord's day, the Sunday, as some folks try to confuse us about Revelation in chapter 1 when John goes into vision. It's not talking about any of those things. What the Sabbath commandment is actually talking about the seventh day of the week. So now we're going to have to leave it up to you to decide, but I think what we're trying to do is make a case for whether or not Saturday or Sunday is the first day or the seventh day. What is clear is that the Sabbath day is the seventh day. The seventh day is the Sabbath day. That's what the scriptures tell us. There is no mistaking between the two. There is no bleed between the two. There is no one blends into the other. There is no change of the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, or from the seventh day to the Sabbath, or to Sunday. There is no point at which there is any transfer of what the seventh day and the fourth commandment. The fourth commandment was written on a table of stone, and the fourth commandment was set in that place. So then you have to ask yourself, is which day is the actual Sabbath day? Well, according to Scripture, the seventh day is the Sabbath. And that's actually what the fourth commandment does say if you continue on reading the fourth commandment. So, and that's where we'll be getting into next week, is the continuation of Exodus 20 verse 9. Okay? So Exodus 20 verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In Genesis, we're reminded of when that occurs. In Genesis 2:2, that's when we find out that the seventh day, that was the day that God rested. That was an example that he set for us. And he took that day, he set it aside, and he made it holy. He did that, and he took that day and he sanctified it. Just the process of sanctification is the process in which something is made holy. Now, later on, I'll be talking about what this sanctification process means and what it actually means to you and me. Because we have this belief, we have this understanding. Paul talks about sanctification. He talks about you and I being sanctified, and this process that you and I are transformed. We're changed from something that is here, which can't live forever, into something that is going to go to heaven, that's something that will live forever. And so it's interesting that when Paul talks about us going to heaven and being something that's going to be live forever, he talks about it that it's necessary for us to be sanctified. So it's interesting that Paul would use this term, sanctified, and which you and I need to be made holy. A process which takes something that cannot live forever into something that will be able to live forever because it is now holy. And then he uses this same term that Christ uses when he takes and blesses this day and calls it a holy day. And then God, when he writes it down on the tables of stone and gives it to Moses, says, remember, as though this day was designed to last forever, that this day was going to be holy forever, so that just like you and I will be sanctified and designed to live forever, that you and I will be made to be holy forever, just like the Sabbath is holy forever, because God's work is holy forever. You begin to understand a little bit of why God's feelings are hurt when man rejects him and man says they don't want to have anything to do with him. So when God repents or regrets that he makes man because man is just evil continuously, there'll come a day when this world becomes so evil again that God decides, instead of destroying man, he's going to take those of us who have been made holy and take us back to heaven, so that when he cleanses this world and he destroys this world for one final time, it won't be to get rid of us. It will be to return and go back to the way things were from the beginning. Take us to that great big banqueting table, as the song goes, and to eat grapes again, as Jesus reminds us and tells us when it comes time for communion. That was the last time that Jesus was going to eat grapes, until he would sit down with us and eat grapes with us again in the new earth, in the new kingdom. So I know I'm adding a whole bunch of stuff on, and I can't help it. That's just the way I am. So I just want to close with this. If you wouldn't mind turn it down a little bit, but just hit that again really quick, and we'll just close it out with this. You can just do it manually like that. You have to click on it again. No, you have to go up and click on the... Yeah, there you go. Click on play. There you go. Yeah, just turn it down just a little bit. Oh, you can turn it a little bit. It's okay. I just want to close it out with this, folks. Anytime we search the scriptures, anytime we open the scriptures, it's really important for us to realize that in order for us to understand, we're coming to a place where we actually need God. We need him to help us understand what we're reading, understand what it is that he's trying to help us. We're searching because we want to understand him. We want to understand his love for us. I want to understand what that means. And so I just invite you to pray and ask God. He knows that you need him. He knows that we need him on a daily basis. He understands that more than we could possibly imagine. Remembering that he is the creator is important, because without him we have nothing, and he will bring us everything that we need, including the understanding that we need. So I just want to say thank you for tuning in with us today, and tell your friends about the journey, and invite them to watch with you next time. Thanks for being here. Father God, thank you for being here with us. We thank you, and we pray all of these things in Jesus' name.